For our next practice, we're going to be drawing a room in one-point perspective. So one of the things that, one of the steps that I always say is to find the horizon line and then find the vanishing point. Another approach to one-point perspective, if you want to find the center of something, you can take and connect the opposite corners. Now I want you to draw very, very lightly because we're going to be erasing part of this line later on. Okay, so I've connected two opposite corners. Now I'm going to connect my remaining opposite corners. Okay, where those two meet or intersect, that's going to be my vanishing point. Eventually I will erase my vanishing point, but I'm going to need it through most of my drawing. Then I need to create a back wall to my room. I'm going to work with a 2.5 inch back wall. So I line up my ruler from one diagonal line of convergence to another diagonal line of convergence and draw a straight line there to create the top of my wall. And then I turn my paper a little bit, again line up the 0 mark, the 2.5 mark, draw a straight line, do the same thing down here, draw a straight line, and then line it up with my starting line. So now I have the back wall of my room, and I also have my vanishing point. Okay, now we don't want our lines of convergence running through our back wall. That's where it'll stop. Our room will stop. So we're going to go ahead and take and erase those lines of convergence. The next step, I want to create a door. So to do this, I need to add a vertical line on one of my walls. So I'm going to work on my left wall here, and I want to have a nice vertical line. So I like to look and see the space between my ruler and the art space, and I'm going to start on my line of convergence and just go up however high I want the door to be. Okay, so there's the left side of my door. To create the dimension, to make it feel like my door is going back in space, I now connect this line to my vanishing point. Now I know my door's not going to go past that back wall, so I only extend that line to my back wall. And then I need to add another parallel vertical line to finish the side of my door, so I can decide where I want my door to end. And I'm going to draw my line, parallel vertical line, all the way down to the end of the floor, and then I can erase any of my extra line there. The next step, I want to create a door frame. The more details that you can add to your objects, the more believable and the easier it is for your viewers to understand what the object is. So I'm going to work with inside of that space, and I'm going to repeat the same process to create a door frame. Oftentimes a door will sit within a wood frame. So I'm just keeping my lines within that initial door, and then I can go ahead and add a doorknob if I wanted to. I could add some hinges on the back side of the door here, just any sort of details that help explain what my object is. Next, I'm going to create a window. I'm going to work on my right side of my wall here, and it's very similar start to the door. I need a vertical line, and so I'm going to go ahead and however tall I want my window to be, I'm going to go ahead and add that line there. Now I need to connect the corners of that line to my vanishing point. So this is kind of like when we would do the corner check. And I draw those going back in space towards my vanishing point. I don't want to use a flat horizontal line because then we're not working in perspective. Then I need to add one more vertical line that's parallel to my first line. So these two lines here are parallel. And I erase any of my lines of convergence that are a little bit too long. So that's the start of my window. Now I'm going to do the same thing I did before, where I'm going to add my lines inside of there to create the window frame. Again, I need to line up any horizontal lines to my vanishing point rather than keeping them perfectly horizontal to create that sense of space or depth. And then to finish my frame, I add a vertical line that's parallel. Now you can see some of my lines intersect or go beyond where I want them to, so I'm going to take my eraser, clean up those extra long pieces. Now one thing that you don't see in your instructions on your page is how to create a window frame. Or the window panes in perspective. So to create window panes in perspective, we're going to find the center of our window. Remember, to do that, we're going to connect opposite corners. And we're going to do this really lightly because we're going to erase these lines. Where these intersect, that's where we're going to put our vertical parallel line for our window pane. And then we're also going to connect it to our vanishing point where they intersect to create the horizontal line of our window pane. And then we go ahead and we erase our diagonal lines. And now we have our window in 1 point perspective. Now what I like to do is kind of add some curtains to it. Think about what would make this feel more like a room. So I can kind of sketch those in place. I'd want to take my time and do a really nice job for my final room, and I could hide any lines that would fall under the curtains. But if you have some extra time during the practice, you might go ahead and add some of those details to start learning how to do that. And then our last step, we're going to practice drawing a floor. So for the floor, I like to take, and on my back wall, I make a mark about every ½ inch. Okay, then I'm going to take and line up my ruler with my vanishing point and that ½ inch mark. I'm going to draw from that ½ inch mark out to create my floorboards. Now there's two different ways you could show your floor. You could show it as wooden boards, or you could show it as tile. This would probably work a little bit better for tile. If I wanted to have wooden boards, I might show a line every1/4 inch versus every ½ inch. You get to pick. So I'm going to show you some wooden floor on one side right here. So to create the wooden floor feeling, I would take, I would take and I would show horizontal lines where those boards would end. And I want to mix up the spacing of them to make them feel like they're staggered. And then I could even put, you know, nail marks, or I could add a wood grain texture to the boards to make them feel more like a floor. The second way you could finish your floor, so I'm going to go ahead and erase that example. The second way is to create a tile. Now to create the tile, you do the same step as before, so every ½ inch, and then connect from your vanishing point out. But to know where to put the horizontal lines, you're actually going to connect from corner to corner, opposite corner, with a diagonal line. And anywhere that they intersect, that's where you're going to add a tile line. So you want to have a nice horizontal line, and what you can do is line up your ruler with the edge of your art space or the edge of your paper to make sure it's nice and perfectly horizontal. And then where those intersected, I added a horizontal line. So here's my next point of intersection. So again, I line up my ruler with the edge of my art space, line it up with that point of intersection, and I draw a horizontal line. And what you're going to notice is as you get back closer to the wall, the intersection points are closer together. That's because as things go into space, they seem farther apart, closer to us, and closer together as they get further away. And then we erase our diagonal line, and there we have our tile floor. And then you can go ahead and, if you wanted to color it in every other square, I like to put a dot in the squares that I'm going to color in, so I don't end up with two of the same right next to each other. So that way I know when I start shading in my floor tiles, which ones I want to have as black and which ones I want to have as white. And of course I would expect you to take your time and do this a lot neater than what I just did right here. So that is how you would draw a room in 1 point perspective.